Yeah, okay. All right. Session after lunch. I'm still seeing people trickle in, but I think they don't know how interesting this topic is going to be. So, let's make them miss this. But just to the topic, GBS, GCC, call them, global capability centers, competency centers, are increasingly becoming the boardroom agenda, right? Both with enterprises, with providers alike. Some see that as a threat, some see that as an opportunity. This morning, Kevin spoke a lot about, how the gravity is sort of shifting to innovation, to technology. And GCCs, GBSs actually have been at the forefront of it. A lot of our research over the last 2 years actually proves it. There are 8,000 GCCs across the globe, out of which about 80-85% are multifunctional GCCs and are focused on digital and innovation. Out of them, about 50 to 55% GCCs have launched new products that have generated revenue for their enterprises this year or last year. About 35% of them actually have functional leaders within them, right? So that actually talks about the prowess of the decision making that happens within their GBSs. So there is a lot of focus on even going from labor arbitrage to technology-driven redesigning of supply chains that are happening. And we've also seen many enterprises sort of collaborate with providers in sort of driving this change and adopting AI innovation, etc. So I'm very happy to sort of talk about this subject I'm very passionate about. And I'm very lucky to be and privileged to be joined by an esteemed panel. And I'll let them introduce themselves, and then we can dive into the panel. Jairo, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm Jairo Quiros. I'm Senior Vice President for Global Business Services and Product Engineering Centers at Equifax.
Great, welcome. Laura?
Laura Walsh. I am the CIO at Culligan International. I also participate actively in the Technology Business Management Council, and 5-time CIO, and predominantly manufacturing.
Great, thanks. Peter?
Yeah, Peter Nag. I'm from Merck. I had the GBS BPO for Merck. I was a good investment banker at one time when the CFO pulled me in 2002 and asked me to build the shared service. It was built like a GCC. The term was not there, but now when I hear Kevin speak this morning about economic gravity, that's what a GCC is.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Umesh Tejwani. I'm with Wipro. I'm a part of the consumer and life sciences vertical. I am also responsible for strategic initiatives and value creation for the Americas region for Wipro.
Great. So I think let's start with you, Peter. I mean, you've been in this, like you were saying, when GCC didn't exist, you kind of defined them, and you've been part of several banks and their journey over several years, and now with Merck as well. How have you seen this evolve? Going back to what Kevin was talking this morning about, going from labor arbitrage to focus on tech. How have you seen this sort of evolve over the last few years or so?
Yeah. The first time I did this was in 2002. It was labor arbitrage.
Yeah.
For every 10 technologists in New York, you saved $1 million in India. That was the thumb rule. Then came operations. And this was with the third party. Wipro was one of our strategic partners. We built ODCs. And then we wanted to get our domain work, what a GCC is now. We wanted to get fixed income, equities, trading, wealth management, compliance, HR, corporate finance, multifunction. This was in 2004-05. That was when we called it, in the banking, they called it a captive. All functions of the firm, they owned it, and it was a captive. This was very successful. At that time, we used the phrase, this will be a strategic asset of the firm. You saw Kevin talk, GCC is a strategic asset. Next time I did it was in Citigroup. Smith Barney Citigroup, 380,000 people. all around the world. They did it, but they didn't do it right. And again, it was driven by IT operations, but not like the one in Lehman where it was multifunction. Citi, those of you know that Citi sold its captive, one of them to Wipro, another one to TCS. Next time was I advised Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank, I was called to London, and they wanted to build what Lehman built, a front office captive. So that was, again, the captives in banking, they reduce the revenue distance. Whenever there's something which is closer to the money and the revenue distance is the least, that is the most valuable, whether it's the people or whether it's the assets. So the Deutsche Bank captive was front office captive. Then I did it in AIG. AIG had captives all around the world, Philippines, KL. Again, they had the wrong role at the wrong location. They put IT developer in Manila, and no CIO wanted to use it. So again, I did it there. The CIO, the head of ONT of AIG sent me to Manila and said, should I shut it down? Should I transform? Or should I grow? Get me the answer. And then, of course, I came to Merck. Merck, very new to this. AIG was behind banking. Banking was way ahead. And pharma is behind insurance. We had a fantastic partner. I think my client partner is here in the room. Brian, if you are here. Yeah, there is Brian. I did not know anything about pharma. Brian basically taught me. So we had a very strategic relationship with our partners. So we have a fully managed service. We moved from FT arbitrage. But 2 years ago, in the interest of the CIO, CEO was Gen AI. We've passed the honeymoon of Gen AI. Now, today, it is GCC. The reason Gen AI became so attractive to the business folks, because it was not opaque. They saw the value. You could have the ChatGPT on your iPhone and do your personal finance. It was very transparent. GCC is going to, Kevin talked about economic gravity, I think. He talked about that. It'll always follow the path of least resistance. A GCC will be a strategic asset that will follow the path of most value to the firm.
Got it.
And I'm here today. Hopefully, we'll be building a GCC soon.
And Peter, we also sort of spoke about how Merck, when you were setting this up, didn't have to go through the entire journey, right? It kind of jumped 2 or 3 paces.
Leapfrogging, absolutely. So we have very good partners. Now, third-party partners are very good, and they are advising us. We also have experience in Merck. We are leapfrogging. We don't have a captive.
Yeah.
We have regional nearshore. We have in Costa Rica. We have in Prague. We have in KL. We are going to leapfrog because we don't have a big captive like the banks have in India. We are going to hopefully leapfrog to a GCC.
Right. And talking about partners, Umesh, could you sort of just throw some color on how the discussion that you're having with your clients, especially in GCC, are changing from, let's say, a couple of years ago?
No, absolutely. As Peter said, I think GBS and GCC have been around for a while. But if I really look at the last year or year and a half, the conversations and the number of transactions has significantly increased.
Yeah.
In fact, we as Wipro have also started a dedicated service line now, just focused on GCCs. Recently, we announced that. And we are having conversations, and the conversation nature is also changing. Now we are talking more about how we can create higher impact. So we talk to the senior leadership on the client side. It's usually C-suite. We are talking about time to value. We are talking about things that require significant amount of investment and talent from their perspective to really further their business agenda. It's no longer about F&A or HRO or perhaps some of the transactional systems, which obviously there's value in that and there's efficiency to be driven from that. But we are seeing a lot of value in terms of looking at high impact, engineering, product development, innovation, discovery, and those type of programs and initiatives that are kind of now coming into the remit of GBS and GCC.
Got it. And given this, this ongoing debate of do we collaborate with them, do we compete with them, how have you seen the models kind of emerge, right? I mean, there's a spectrum of models from assisted to bot to BOTT to BOAT, and if you can sort of talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So we have seen a range of models, right? On one end is, let's say, traditional outsourcing.
Yeah.
And on the other end, let's say, is a BOT model for a GCC, right? And in between, we have seen models like assisted GCC, virtual GCC, hybrid models, as well as flavors and variants of these. What we have seen is everybody is looking to see an accelerated time to value. And we have clients who have scale, and there are clients who are perhaps subscale in terms of their requirements for GCC. So we are seeing a trend where if you are looking for something which is time to value is faster and you want to accelerate because you have to obviously set up the infrastructure, recruit the talent, onboard them, kind of find ways of working. It has to fit into your headquarter agenda, right. And the ways of working, all that. So all of that takes time to do. And we are seeing assisted captive or GCC as a service as something which is kind of filling that niche or filling that demand in terms of offering that services to our clients. There is obviously models of BOT. We also have BOTT, which is build, operate, transform, and transfer, which are still the mainstays of the approach that we have.
The discussion there. And Jairo, you've just sort of recently completed a BOT, and you're the very few clients I know who has used T finally, because a lot of the enterprises I know sign a BOT deal, but they never sort of look at transfer back. So if you can just talk about your experience and journey with the BOT and provider collaboration, and how that's kind of changed the culture and how you had to kind of focus on that element to make it successful.
Yeah, so at Equifax, I think our GBS is actually more than just a typical traditional operations. So I lead a team of people in Costa Rica, 2,000 people within the spectrum of finance, operations, security. And then we've created a center of excellence around automation and AI. And through the course of the past few years, we've deployed technology, and that gave us a space for us to really think about how do we continue to build the right structures to support the company. The company has gone through a $3 billion transformation for the last few years. We move everything to the cloud, so our aspiration is to be cloud native by the end of this year, completely, the entire stack, the products, everything that we sell. So operating the company required different skill sets and in that new reality. So when we went to this exercise of trying to determine what's the future, we decided to invest money and implement 2 large product engineering centers in India. That's where the BOT came about. And so I'll say that the build operate is very important. So working with your partner in terms of requirements from security standpoint, the governance that is required, make sure that your IP and the knowledge that you have with them is safely retained and strategically duplicated or replicated. But the transfer piece, the T on the BOT, is what's really, really important. I think for us, really focus on that transfer phase was critical because we decided to perform mission critical work through this engagement. And so without the focus on the actual transfer, then you lose a lot of the value. And I'll say that the most challenging aspect for us was the cultural aspect, right? We've been doing business with UST for a number of years. So a lot of the folks that came to Equifax, they already knew Equifax, and they have been working for us for the last number of years, which was beneficial to us. But the culture is different, right? So, and then if you don't work with your partner as a partner and just treat it as a third-party vendor or a facilitator, then there's a lot of the value they're going to lose in the way. Right? For us, the focus was building the right culture, making sure that people coming to Equifax knew about not only the company and the technologies, but also how purpose, people, and culture was going to make a difference as we decided to, as in India, for the long run.
Yeah.
So.
I think great point. I mean, to what Umesh was saying, right, the time to value, etc. How real is it? I mean, how real is this promise of value, and how should sort of GCCs prepare to make sure they can maximize this promise or realize?
No, I think it's very real. So I think when we enter India, we've been doing business, with partners and colleagues and delivering work out of this new market for a long time. But really, it's about how do you combine all the expertise that you've built over time. So it's not only about the BOT and the contractual requirements and the obligations, but it's more about how do we co-innovate and think about this new future. So the value is there. We're supporting 280 different platforms and products out of India. So it's big. For us, it's a big footprint. And you can only do it in a way in which then you could draw the value very quickly. So we've now deploying end-to-end products and delivering that sort of capability to the different regions we support. Particularly Europe, we've made a lot of progress there. But you have to have a plan. You got to be able to execute on the plan and make sure that both your partner and yourself are fully vested in making sure that everything that you said you're going to deliver, right? So in our case, we had no choice. We got issues along the way, but we learned quickly how to reconfigure and state our plans. But at the end of the day, I'll say that once you are committed, then it's very real. You can get the benefit.
So I think to understand what your role is in the partnership, that you have an equity in actually that value realization as well.
Correct.
And knowing how to sort of collaborate with providers.
It's both the provider, but also your internal customer.
Exactly.
Right? Because if you don't got your internal customer, in this case, the regions that were investing in these products, our delivery capability and whatever skills we have, really didn't, work. But if you had everybody, really focus on delivering, then you could get the benefit in our case, was very quickly. In less than a year,
Excellent. Yes. Laura, what about you? I mean, moving from engineering and business processes to, let's say, IT, have you seen something similar happen in your experience as well?
I think it's interesting when you define global business services and value, right? So I'm going to go back to the conversation that we had earlier about discretionary spend, right?
Yes.
If you have discretionary spend, you shouldn't, right? At this point in time, every single dollar that's in the technology budget should be accounted for. This is not a Doge thing. This is actually, if you go look at back at the public sector, this is an Obama thing, right? This went back to regulations where we were asked as CIOs to make sure that if you had a budget that you could point to where every single dollar in your budget went and your business could understand the value of every single dollar that was out there. So when we look at a value proposition from an IT perspective, right, we're always in sales, right? IT sell, right? Because nobody understands what we do. What does this do? Why are we buying this? Why does it cost so much, right? These are questions we get all the time. So I'm actually also part of a group called Technology Business Management. And Technology Business Management is like PMI, but for responsible financial management over your IT budget, right? And what the framework does is it helps CIOs and CFOs kind of take their technology spend and point to the value proposition that each dollar has, which really helps us, right? So when you look at your budget and you look at where the value is, you should be able to do your allocations out by business unit or by country, depending on how you're structured, and just basically show the flow of money, and then give those presidents and P&L owners over those budgets the accountability and the visibility to help you make decisions, right, on where this all goes. So when you talk about GBS, it's always interesting because if your GBS is external or your GBS could be internal, it could be a joint venture and a partnership between firms. It could be a lot of different flavors of things, right? And you have to figure out what that is because there is no one size fits all for any of us, right? We all do things very differently. So in my new role at Culligan, we are very decentralized. Everyone made it very clear, coming in, countries have complete autonomy to run their business the way that they want. How do you run global business services over something like that, right? So you find commonalities, but then you have to give the ability to, have the governance layer be thin enough where they can modify what they want. Because transportation management, let's use something very easy. Let's talk about what's my AI value proposition for trucks, right? Well, in Mexico, it's hijacking. It's kidnapping of truck drivers, right? So one of the things that we have is we've got our knock-up and we know where all of our trucks are and we know the dangerous routes where we have incidents and we avoid them. And if we see the trucks real-time going down the wrong routes, we call them and we say, stop, that's not the route. This one takes longer, but safety is our priority, right? That's not the same use case that you're gonna run into when you say Europe. Europe is driver limitation, right? There's not enough people out there to drive these trucks, and there's also not enough safe parking spaces to put the trucks, right? So then it's a route optimization that you're looking at to make sure that even though the route's a little longer, your drivers are safe because they've got a place to park, and you are optimized as possible because you have fewer resources to get out and do the driving within the trucks, right? So the strategy for transportation management, and China's one of my favorites, the drivers fall asleep. They work too hard, right? And there's no regulation on the number of hours, and they're not protected the way that they should be. So there's actually, technology that we put in the trucks to see when their heads are going down. And that could be distracted drivers anywhere with cell phones. But really, it was a protection mechanism to make sure that if we had a driver that was going to fall asleep, we were able to alert them that, and shake and make noises and things to wake them back up and then tell them to take the truck off the road and to take a nap. So, but you can't do that unless you start at the very bottom of, and we've all been saying it this entire week, what is the problem we're trying to solve? If we understand the problem that we're trying to solve, it's very easy to go back and have that value conversation about what am I getting for that money that goes in between. No one in my business is very interested in that middle layer. They care about the problem and they care about the resolution. All that stuff in between, that's for the technology leaders and the business partners to figure out and deliver. But we need to be able to tie those things together. Where it ties into global business services too is if you have that partnership. So I've been in roles, and I'm sure most of us with our little black lanyards have, where your partner is not a partner. They're a vendor, right? So you're outsourcing server builds and password resets and these mundane non-value add activities, but they don't come back and say, why aren't you doing single sign-on? Why aren't you doing smart deployment of servers? So I've run into those situations where I assume that part of my purchase is thought leadership. I assume that when I pay for a big five, that they're going to come in and tell me how to fix that problem based on the breadth of other customers that they're working with. If I don't see that value, then the GBS service, I think about insourcing, right? And then when we talk about AI, and this will be my last little point here, I'm not a large organization. We're multinational, we're very complex, we're not, substantially sized. So I'm not going to draw the attention of the Microsofts and the Amazons and all the big companies to build use cases with me. It's just not going to happen. But I do buy a lot of enterprise software. I'm not interested in building an AI department that can automate AP, right? I already pay SAP to do that, right? So where I'm watching the industry is I don't have this cool, exciting talk about all these AI things that we're building. I'm watching the market. I'm watching the use cases that are successful in that 20, 30, 40%. It's funny, everybody has a different number. And I'm watching what my core providers are doing, because if I'm paying those enterprise rates and I'm keeping current on my software, I expect that that's going to be built natively into the solutions that I've already purchased, and I don't need to go build that. So then I don't have to worry about competing for technology talent, because it should be in the solutions that I'm paying for, the global service providers that I'm using. And I don't have to worry about, that whole upskill. I just need to figure out basic use cases with the co-pilots and the things that can hit the masses and do the training and make sure that we're using that in the most capable and responsible way.
No, that's very interesting, because a lot of conversations we have with our clients is around this narrative of cost savings, and to your point on TBM, right? How do you value your spend? And yes, cost savings is table stakes now, but you cannot always consider spend on engineering as spend. It's actually an investment, right? And that's the sort of change in, I would say, the way the perspectives are, that we need to sort of change the narrative as well, right?
Well, and it's silly little things, because discretionary spend always hits the same buckets first, right? So if you look at your T&E bucket, right, and you just have a bucket of T&E, of course it's going to get cut. But if you show that all of that travel is associated with a certain strategic item, and you map that all in one effort that is approved and everybody agrees that there's value to doing whatever that activity is, again, you have no discretionary spend, because every single penny is mapped to an initiative that everybody believes in. And then when you go to budget cuts, everybody reviews and everybody
How important is that?
begrudgingly agrees that, we already agreed to do this stuff. But one of the things that I've thought about lately that I haven't thought about my entire career, and now I'm kind of feeling bad about, is not reevaluating multi-year projects when you're in them, right? You've got a $100 million project, $125 million project that's going, and you just assume that you have to finish that project because you're halfway there or 3/4 of the way there. And not often do we go back and reevaluate, is it still going to hit the goals that the organization intended for it to hit? And it's a really remarkable thing, because we see all these graphs and diagrams about the accelerated pace of change. It is more important that we have more agile thinking and less multi-year programs, because you might have to pivot and sink 20, 30, $40 million on a project that's no longer going to hit these accelerated goals, or that somebody's done faster with a technology that you didn't even know would be available when you started on that path originally.
Right. And from that perspective, how do you drive decision around, should we outsource or should we offshore? By offshore, I mean, should we go the GBS route or should we go with the partner route? Like, what is that thinking?
So it kind of pulls on the threads that I've said before. It really depends on any moment that I'm spending doing things that could be offshored is a moment that I'm not connecting with my business, right? I don't want to be the expert in all things IT, right? I don't need an entire department that does infrastructure as code to do server deployments, right? I don't need management tools and people sitting there watching, like in the data center days, to make sure things are running. Like, those are things that should be outsourced, and then with the right partner should be optimized, and then should be AI'd, and then, and then we talk about what builds on top of that. And one of the things that I think is funny, and I don't know if anybody has noticed this during the conversations, but this fear of people losing their jobs to AI, I don't know a single person that is afraid of losing their job to AI. And admittedly, if that's in your head, you should not be doing whatever it is you're doing anymore, right? Because you're not providing value if you can't think differently about how these changes are going to be impacted. But I think it's not scary, and it's not taking over the world, and it's one of those things we really do need to coexist with and figure out how it works for us. The theme is still the same. The basic building blocks are always there. We all talk about process, we all talk about data, we all talk about people, right? And a lot of it is that change management and communication, and I hate all these words because they're so overused, right? But the reality of it is, IT deals with this problem all the time. We want blockchain. Do you know what blockchain is, or did you just read about it in the journal earlier today, right? And then when you break apart all of the things that you need to do in order to get there, right? If you have not kept your hygiene up on running a good IT organization, the reality is AI is going to be a stretch for the moon for you right now until you figure out how to do those things. Because it's not about prompt engineering. You can't prompt engineer bad data to give you a better answer, right? It's not writing the question. It's making sure that the information that you have, if it's custom to you and your organization, can be synthesized in a way to get you an answer to a question that's harder for you to get. But if the good data isn't there, you can't answer that question regardless of how good your prompt engineering department is.
Interesting. I think it's important in that whole sort of decision matrix, how even AI kind of is influencing that, right? And Umesh, sort of going back to you and how you were talking about the client conversations, is there also sort of, you also advise your clients on, okay, we can help you offshore it, we can help you build GBSs, but this part is something that I think we can do better. And erstwhile, it was focused on, like Laura was saying, a lot of things that I don't want to do. But now it's also about co-creations, right? So are you seeing these models of joint investments coming in where you also have a stake in making sure that product is successful?
Yeah, absolutely. We are seeing that more and more now. So obviously, to Laura's point, whatever you can outsource is basically your basic run the business, which a provider such as Wipro has solved it for someone and brings some best practices, brings some amount of tools, automation, AI use cases that already work on that. That kind of becomes the table stakes of providing that as a service back to the client. That becomes the table stakes on the run side. On the change side, I'll give you an example. One of the recent ones, an automotive company, we set up a GCC for them in India. This was basically to do a lot of product development and engineering for their cars. And this was something which we set up between about 12 to 14 months. We ramped up to about 750 people. And it was tremendous amount of effort in terms of putting in place ways of working, getting the regulatory approval, setting up facilities, and kind of really making it operational. But once it was there, it kind of helped them meet their business goals quickly. And we are now in year 3 of that journey. And the original construct was that they will take over the BOT, the T part will kick in. But now they are actually looking at expanding that scope a little bit. And even because of macroeconomic uncertainty and tariffs, they're even thinking about scaling down the T part of the BOT, which essentially means instead of 100%, it might become something like a 50-50. Yeah. So we are seeing those type of models. Another example is for a health tech company. They are looking at how can they modernize their application landscape. And they want to do it within a certain period of time, which is 2 years. And really scaling up a high-performance engineering team that can come in, look at your legacy landscape, really put in place something which can take you to the next generation of modern, cloud-first, AI-ready type infrastructure and application is something that we are helping them do. Another example is a telco for which we are looking at, they are thinking about how do they innovate with their customers. They are a B2B network providers to many businesses and enterprises. And we are talking about how do you bring innovation to what you sell them and how can you sell maybe managed network differently? How do you bring some AI elements into what you offer to your clients? And that's the level at which the conversations are going.
And to Laura's point, I mean, if an enterprise is investing and spending in you, they would expect you to sort of give that advice and lead the roadmap down the way, right?
Absolutely. So there are set of services which are best outsourced. There are set of services where co-create is the way to go because it might be nascent or it might be a new area and it requires some amount of collaboration with even involving business and technology on the client side, on the partner side to make it successful. And there are ideas which are really left field, which are complete innovation. And we are doing some of that as well with some clients in terms of, for one medtech company, we are helping them as they design their product in terms of cardiac rhythm management, stuff like that. So they are thinking of constructs which can actually drive what we saw in Kevin's presentation, that wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. We are talking about market entry, market penetration, growth type ideas. So we are seeing some of that as well. So obviously the involvement of partner can be a gradient scale as you kind of look at from this to this. But we are seeing more and more conversations on the wave 3 side.
Understood. Peter, your viewpoint very quickly, and if you can segue into where do you see this, the GBS GCC model grow next?
Where you'd see the GCC, you saw Kevin's chart on the extreme right. You know, I've been listening to Kevin in these, this is my 4th time, I think. There was digital, and then there was Gen AI. Today on the extreme right was GCC. Yeah. If you remember his chart, this is the future. In terms of going forward, each one of you, I'll tell you what you were talking about. A key product or a process that you must have handy before you go to GCC is a very structured process of right role, right location, right cost, and right time. If you can convert that to a science, it'll help you. Where do you send which work? Some work should remain in-house. In terms of the size, if you're not looking for at least 1,000 people, don't do a GCC. You can just partner. You should have in your... Are
you going to get in trouble for saying that?
I don't know. I'm just saying reality out here. So the 1,000 people, and you should have, there's a need for a nearshore also. So you have where, you know, in Latin America for the Americas, Eastern Europe for Europe, and you can have for Asia Pac somewhere in KL or other regions. So that's the GCC. GCC will be here to stay. The model, like I said, in banking has been proved. So you will take away us versus them. You will take away cost saving. You will get to use expanded capability, network effect, from process to product. That is what the GCC will give you.
All right. Now we're out of time, but GCC is always a food for passionate discussion, right? But I think to conclude quickly, they are here to stay. I think you will see a lot of innovation being driven from GCCs, and like we're seeing a lot of leaders emerge from GCCs and make more influencing decisions in the boardroom. But thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation. If anybody wants to sort of talk to the panelists or me, we are available right here. But thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation. Thank you.